Hi everybody, my name is Thomas and I just wanted to share with you my very first ayahuasca experience and a little bit of a backstory. The reason I did ayahuasca was it all started by listening to the Howard Stern show. And Robin, his sidekick, would talk about her trips down to South America and how this thing called ayahuasca had all these amazing properties and healing properties. And she said every time she did it, she had this profound experience. So that's when the door opened. And then for years, I would do a little bit of research here and there, not really sure what people were talking about. Like, it was like these weird experiences that were difficult to explain, but people did the best they could. And but ultimately, the one thing that kind of hooked me in is that someone made a comment that doing one night of ayahuasca was like doing 10 years of intense psychoanalysis. And I felt like I had all this baggage and my psyche wasn't exactly where I wanted to be. And I was like, okay, if that's possible, then yes, I would like to do it. I don't care how bad that one night is, as long as I can get over some stuff that was really holding me down, then yeah, I would definitely try it out. Unfortunately, I didn't know where to go. And I ended up, for years, not being able to enroll anybody into going down to South America with me to do this psychedelic. It actually scared a lot of people when I shared it with them. And a lot of people were like, a lot of my friends were like, don't do it. Don't do it. Like, listen, you do not want to do this. This is like next level stuff. Like, maybe you should start with acid and then gradually build your way up to it. I was like, I don't know. But I had the calling, right? And a lot of people that get drawn to the ayahuasca, they do get a calling because it has such great healing properties. And I was really seeking this kind of healing. So I ended up finding a place in Kentucky that has federal exemption. And they actually recently came out with a TV series on the Vice network called Kentucky Ayahuasca. Now, it took great courage because I couldn't convince anyone to come down with me. So I spent a weekend. I flew down. I rented a car. I ended up driving an hour from the airport to this random place in a trailer park, in this like tiny little shack of a building with concrete floors, black trash bags, like Christmas lights. It wasn't the nicest place. As soon as I stepped in, I wanted to walk right out. But fortunately, there was this couple there that were older, in their 50s. They were super friendly, super nice. And we immediately sparked a conversation. And I ended up staying. And then the shaman, his name was Steve, he had been doing this for at least 12 years. He had a very storied past, spent some time in federal prison. And even though he was very intimidating, he was very wise at the same time. So I really ended up trusting him. And I mean, it takes courage to do any type of psychedelic, especially something like ayahuasca. But I was committed and I was ready, and I took the first cup. You know, it's kind of like a shot glass worth, maybe a little bit more. And it tastes, it's cold. They call it like a tea. It's brewed, cooked together, and it tastes very earthy, and it's not very pleasant. So I took the first one. I laid down on my cot, and then 30 minutes later, I took another shot glass worth, and then eventually something started happening. But then Steve came around with a pitcher and was like, "Does anybody want more?" Now, this is my very first experience. I had no idea if I should take more or not, but I just was like all in, and I raised my hand, and then I took another. So my journey started, and then I took another dose, which was pretty intense. And it started with a lot of geometric shapes, colors, patterns. It really was out of this world. Like, it really, I can't really explain it. I mean, anybody who's done it has had that experience, I'm sure, but you can't really explain it. It's like out of this world. But then something really interesting happened was something came into my body. It felt like a feminine energy or spirit. And it felt like it had like scanned my body. At one point, I had a vision of an X-ray scan of my neck. And I was like, oh, that's really interesting. And then eventually my chest started convulsing. And it wasn't like scary convulsing. It was just like, it was like a shaking that was happening from like internally. And it was dealing with my lungs. And it felt like my lungs were a punching bag and something was inside of it punching it. And it didn't hurt, it wasn't painful. But it felt like it was cleaning out my lungs. Now, I had smoked for 7 years. I had a vehicle that I'm pretty sure was poisoning me, and I always felt like my lungs were really unhealthy. And it felt like this energy spirit was actually cleansing my lungs. And then after that was complete, the next go around was with my neck, the one that I saw the X-ray scan. Now, I had a weightlifting injury, where I had bench press and did something funky and something cracked in the back of my neck and never healed. And it really was challenging because I have the forward head posture, and when I would play sports, I'd get really stiff and it was just very uncomfortable. I got it checked out by an orthopedic, I got it checked out by a chiropractor. Nobody could solve this problem for me. And then all of a sudden, I'm laying on this cot, and something is forcing my head to turn to the left, and then all the way to the right. Now, it felt like it was going farther past past the point that it's ever has gone before. But it just kept doing it over and over again. And it did it for like 10 to 15 minutes, but during the entire process, I could feel the back of my neck. It felt like a healing sensation. It was like a tingling. And it was just like, I kept saying to myself, oh my God, this feels better and better. It feels better and better. It was an incredible experience. Here's the amazing thing. For whatever reason, my neck was healed from this ayahuasca experience, and it never bothered me again. And then the third thing was, it had scanned my brain. And I sensed it scanned my brain, and I knew it was dealing with my depression. Now, just as a disclaimer, you don't do antidepressants while on ayahuasca because there's an MAO inhibitor that really will cause serious problems. So I had to get off my antidepressant 60 days prior to doing the ceremony. So just so you know, just as a safety precaution. But the interesting thing is that feminine energy was like forcing me to smile. And it made me smile bigger than I'd ever smiled before. And at the same time, I was purging tears from my eyes. And it was a very cathartic feeling. It felt really good. And then when that was done, and she made me smile bigger than I ever smiled before, she went right to my chest. And she filled me with this feeling of love that I never felt before. It was one of the most beautiful experiences ever. And I had never expected that to happen. Like, I went down there for some psychological and emotional healing. I never knew that there was actually some type of physical healing component. And then I found out afterwards, after the ceremony, when I'm sharing this, it's like, oh yeah, that's possible. It doesn't always happen, but I was really blown away that that's what happened for me in my very first experience. And, I'll share a little bit more about what happened after that, was that I could feel all the spectrums of emotions, from the high points of fear to the low points of fear, to the high points of anger, to the low points of anger, to the high points of joy, to the low points. All my emotions, every single spectrum, just kept going up and down quickly, up and down. It was the wildest feeling and experience ever, to experience every single emotion, as if a piano key, if you run your hands down a piano key, and each emotion, it's like a different spectrum of emotion for every 5 keys. And it was just like, it was really intense. And I don't know what the purpose of it was. It's just like, maybe I had been so suppressed emotionally that it was just kind of giving me a tune-up. You know, like these experiences on ayahuasca, the way that I explain it, now I've done 26 ceremonies, and now I do ceremonies in Colombia, and I host trips in Colombia. But, you know, I explain it this way. You have dreams, and your dreams are so intelligent that your subconscious mind is creating a movie for you to learn something, right? And then you wake up, and then sometimes you remember the dream, sometimes you don't. But most of the times, interpreting the dream is really challenging. Now, ayahuasca is doing a very similar thing, but you're awake in the dream, and it breaks the visual representation of reality, right? And it's always about healing or learning or guiding you. It's tapping into your higher intelligence, your higher self, so that you can grow quickly. Now, it's quite remarkable. And every single time I do it, it takes courage. So, you know, that fear, I don't know if that ever goes away completely. Maybe it does. But your subconscious mind is always a little scared of like, what am I going to learn? What am I going to experience? What kind of pain am I going to endure? And I've had many experiences where I've experienced extreme pain, but I also was able to release it, you know, and that's the purging component of ayahuasca. So when people hear that you throw up on ayahuasca, it's actually not a bad experience. It's actually quite pleasant, because what it's doing is it's taking these emotions that have been stored in your body for many, many years, and it's bringing it up and it's festering it up, and then all of a sudden it releases in a purging process, and it's amazing. Like the next day you feel really good, you feel cleaned out, like you feel like you've let go of something. And it's all done in a manner that really allows you to grow without actually knowing exactly what happens. Like all you know is that you experience some kind of transformation, but you don't know exactly what happened. You don't know exactly what you released, and you get these messages or these downloads, and you're trying to spend the next few months trying to interpret them, you know, because it's not like an immediately, like everything shifts for you. It's like, no, here's the lessons that you need to learn, and they're quite wise. So part of it is a release. Another part is like an educational experience. But regardless, it is one of the most profound experiences that you could ever go through. And it raises your levels of consciousness. It opens up your perceptual filters. It makes you more aware. It makes you a more developed human being. You know, and that's why I love it. And that's why I share it. And that's why I encourage people to try it out, because you will get something really great out of it. Even though the journey is challenging, that's okay, because the growth is so critical, is so powerful, is so amazing. So yeah, I just wanted to share my first ayahuasca experience. Thanks.